Would you still love someone if you found out everything they told you was a lie? That question would haunt Wesley for the rest of his life. But back then, it all started with a coffee spill. The rain had just stopped when Wesley ducked into the corner bookstore cafe. The bell above the door jingled softly. Warm lights, rows of vintage books, the faint hum of indie jazz. It smelled like cinnamon, ink, and new beginnings. He needed this place. Not for coffee, for peace. Life had been loud lately. Rent overdue, freelance gigs drying up, and his laptop barely holding on with duct tape and hope. He stepped to the counter, ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, and turned to scan for a seat. That's when it happened. Crash. Splash. A gasp. Hot coffee soaked his shirt and splattered across his chest like battle wounds. His laptop bag thudded to the floor. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," a voice cried. He blinked, stunned, heart racing, and looked up into the wildest pair of hazel eyes he'd ever seen. A petite woman stood frozen, paper cup crushed in her trembling hand, eyes wide with panic. "I didn't see you. I was backing up. Please, I..." Wesley raised his hand. "It's okay. It's all right. Just, ow, that's hot." She immediately dropped to her knees, fumbling for napkins from the counter behind her. "I ruined your shirt," she whimpered. "It's not exactly designer," he said, trying to ease the tension. She looked up, and for a second, their eyes locked. Something flickered in hers. Something deep. "Haunted. I'm Paulette," she blurted, still dabbing at his soaked clothes. "Wesley," he chuckled nervously. Wesley, who just became coffee soup. She laughed, a soft, embarrassed giggle. It was the kind of laugh that made you want to hear it again. A barista handed her a fresh cup. "On the house," he said. "Please try not to throw this one." She flushed crimson, then turned to Wesley. "Let me make it up to you. Can I buy you a coffee? Or a muffin? Or like dry cleaning?" He raised an eyebrow. "You're offering dry cleaning to a guy who washes everything in his bathtub?" She laughed again. "Okay," he said. "I'll settle for coffee. As long as you promise not to wear it this time." They sat across from each other in a corner booth, him still damp, her still flustered. She was unlike anyone he'd met, wearing a faded, oversized sweater, ripped jeans, and canvas sneakers that looked older than his career. No makeup, no jewelry, just a raw kind of charm. He learned she worked part-time at a diner, studied psychology online, and loved vintage poetry. "I collect torn books," she said, sipping her coffee like it held secrets. "Ones no one wants. I fix their pages. You fix broken books?" She shrugged. They deserve second chances. Wesley leaned back, watching her. She had this way of hiding and revealing at the same time. Like every word was both a truth and a distraction. "So, are you always this clumsy?" he asked. She smiled. "Only around people who matter." That made him pause. "Do I matter already?" "You might," she whispered. When they left the cafe, the streets were slick with light drizzle. She clutched her thrifted tote bag like it contained treasure. He offered to walk her home. "It's not far," she said. He insisted. They walked 3 blocks, turned twice, and the street began to shift. Paint peeled from buildings. Broken fences. Shuttered windows. Graffiti like ghosts on the walls. She stopped outside a narrow, rustic gate. "This is me," she said. The building behind her leaned to one side like it had given up trying. A single bulb flickered on the porch. "You live here alone?" he asked. "With my aunt. She's sick. I take care of her." He nodded. That's really kind of you." She hesitated. "Thanks for walking me." He smiled. "Thanks for baptizing me in espresso." That laugh again. Soft. Sad. As she stepped inside, he turned to leave, but glanced back one last time. She stood in the doorway, watching him, and that's when he saw it. Just for a split second, her smile slipped. Her eyes hardened. Not cold, not cruel, just distant, calculating. Then it was gone. Back to shy, awkward Paulette. He walked home drenched and confused. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about her eyes. Hazel, yes, but layered. Like a story trying not to be read. She was clearly broke, clearly living modestly, but something in her didn't fit the picture. The way she spoke, the way she carried herself, the softness of her voice, but the sharpness behind her gaze. He told himself he was imagining things. Just another eccentric bookstore girl with a tragic backstory and clumsy hands. He liked that. He liked her. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that everything he saw, everything she showed him, was carefully planned, scripted, chosen. The only real thing was the accidental meeting and the coffee spill. Because Paulette Cameron wasn't just clumsy. She was watching him too, and he was the one being tested. They weren't supposed to fall for each other. Not like this. But two broken people will always recognize the cracks in each other's hearts. Wesley and Paulette started dating 2 weeks after the coffee spill. He hadn't even meant to ask her out. It just happened. She was sitting on his couch, wearing one of her worn-out hoodies, flipping through an old graphic novel. He made a stupid joke. She laughed, and the silence that followed was louder than anything they'd said before. They kissed, and that was it. From then on, it was late-night walks and instant noodles, inside jokes and whispered dreams. She told him she worked odd hours as a part-time waitress at a diner on 17th, said her aunt, Aunt Marie, was sick, barely mobile, and Paulette was her only caregiver. She never spent the night at his place. Said she wasn't into premarital sex, and he was fine with. He just loved spending any spare moment they had together. I don't really have many people in my family, she told him one evening as they walk along in the park. It's just me, her, and a few others. Sometimes I envy people from large families, she said sadly. Wesley understood. Too well. His own parents had split when he was 8. His dad vanished into addiction. His mom into night shifts and unpaid bills. Before he turned 18, he was already raising himself. So when Paulette looked at him with those soft, tired eyes, he didn't see a liar. He saw himself. They became a team. A fragile one, but real. They cooked simple meals, pasta, beans, the occasional stolen rotisserie chicken when he got paid by a wealthy client. She loved to sing while they cooked. Old jazz songs, French lullabies. She always said her mom used to play them before she passed. Sometimes she'd dance barefoot across his creaky apartment floor, holding a wooden spoon like a mic. He'd just sit and stare, smiling. Because even in her thrift store clothes and messy bun, Paulette made life feel like art. They shared dreams too. I want to write a book one day, she told him once, sprawled across his floor, sketching nonsense in his notebook. Something raw, honest, about broken girls who choose to rise. He grinned. I designed the cover. Promise, promise. She never talked about money, never wanted gifts. She insisted on splitting cheap dates. She fixed his torn shirts with tiny, perfect stitches. To Wesley, she was everything not like the world he knew. No filters, no pretense, just heart. But heart can lie too. The first time it happened, it was raining again. Wesley was walking back from a job interview. He'd gotten turned down again. No degree, no connections, no chance. He pulled his hoodie tighter, head down, steps heavy. And then he saw her, across the street, at the corner of 8th and Lincoln. She was wearing that oversized coat he liked, hood up, phone pressed her ear. He almost called out, until something stopped him. A sleek, black SUV rolled up beside her. Tinted windows. The kind of car that didn't belong anywhere near this part of town. The back door opened. Paulette looked both ways. As she climbed in, just like that, Wesley froze. He waited. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe it was someone who just looked like her. Maybe. But then the SUV drove past him. Slow enough for him to see. It was her. Same coat. Same bun. Same profile he traced with his fingers in the dark. She didn't see him. Or if she did, she didn't react. The SUV turned down a side street and vanished. Wesley stood in the rain, soaked, confused, got twisted into a knot. He didn't mention it right away. He couldn't. What would he even say? Hey, babe, I saw you getting into a mysterious rich people car. Should I be worried? She came over the next day, humming like always, carrying a container of homemade stew and a bundle of fresh thrift store books. He waited until they were halfway through their meal. Hey, weird question, he started, forcing a smile. You said you walked to work, right? She nodded. Ever get rides from friends? Like occasionally? She didn't flinch. Oh yeah, she said casually. Sometimes my friend Trish picks me up if it's raining. What? He hesitated. Just thought I saw you yesterday. Getting into a car. She blinked. What kind of car? A black SUV. Tinted windows. A beat. Then she laughed. Yeah, that was Trish. Her dad's car, actually. He spoils her too much. She offered me a lift because I looked like a drowned cat. Her voice was smooth, playful, but her eyes, they didn't match. Something in them had shifted, only for a second, like a door closing behind a smile. Wesley nodded slowly. Cool, just curious. She leaned over and kissed his forehead. Jealous, Mr. Graphic Designer? Terrified someone might steal my broken book fixer, he joked. She giggled. Never. But that night, long after she left, Wesley couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, heart thudding. There was no Trish in her stories before. She never mentioned a friend with an SUV, or any friend who had rich parents, for that matter. The more he thought about it, the more it twisted. And the way she stepped into that car, it wasn't hesitant. It wasn't awkward. It was smooth, natural, like she belonged there. Still, Wesley didn't push. He told himself it didn't matter. She said it was a friend. He had no reason not to believe her. She was still the same girl who burned toast and cried during Pixar movies and sang to street cats, right? But the shadows had started to move. And the truth? It was already circling them, waiting. Have you subscribed to our channel yet? Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. They had no money, no plan, no reason to believe anything would work out. But somehow, in the middle of broken furniture and dreams held together by duct tape, Wesley felt certain of one thing. He wanted her, forever. The idea came to him while holding a cup of instant noodles. The cheap kind, the kind they enjoyed like it was some gourmet dish. They had been dating for about 5 months. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, hair messy, cheeks glowing from laughter. They just finished watching a bootleg copy of Amelie on his laptop, and she had tears in her eyes. Life doesn't have to be perfect to be magical, she whispered, still half in the story. And something in Wesley just snapped into place. He reached for the drawer beside the microwave, dug through loose coins, ketchup packets, and a broken keychain. And there it was, a plastic ring, a joke gift from a cereal box, green and shiny with a fake jewel the size of a penny. He didn't even hesitate. He dropped to one knee, right there beside the noodles. Paulette Cameron, he began, voice shaking. You make burnt toast taste like heaven. You make rain feel like confetti. You make my entire life feel like it finally means something. She stared at him, eyes wide. I can't give you diamonds, or a house, or even a proper dinner, but I can give you everything I have. Every ounce of love, every late night, every fight, every morning, all of it. He held up the ring. So, will you marry me? Silence. And then, she dropped her noodles, burst into tears, nodded like her neck was about to snap. Yes, she whispered. Yes. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ridiculous ring onto her finger. It was way too big, and it slipped off almost immediately. They both burst into laughter, and then they kissed like two people who had nothing and everything at the same time. But right after, something changed. They toasted their engagement with juice, had a good laugh, and loved every minute of it. This was the life. Then Paulette turned toward him, suddenly serious. Wesley, yeah, promise me something. He brushed hair from her face. Anything. Promise me, she paused. Her eyes searched his like they were trying to crawl inside his soul. Promise me we'll never chase money. That will always stay grounded, no matter what happens. He blinked. Where's that coming from? Just she swallowed. People change. Money does that. I've seen it. It twists love, ruins it. Wesley nodded slowly. Okay, I promise. She still didn't relax. You sure? Babe, he said gently. I'm proposing with a ring from cereal box. Do I look like I'm about to start chasing millions? She let out a shaky laugh, but the tension didn't leave her shoulders. She curled into him, tight, like a child hiding from thunder. And in the quiet that followed, Wesley's smile faded. Because for the first time, he realized something. Paulette wasn't scared of being poor. She was terrified of being rich. He tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just her past. Maybe her aunt had suffered from debt collectors or lost everything in a lawsuit. Maybe she'd been burned by someone who had it all and used it to hurt her. People carry baggage. He understood that. But it wasn't just that one night. From then on, Paulette became hyper-fixated on simplicity. She turned down a better apartment he found, said it was too fancy. And once, when he surprised her with a thrifted leather jacket, she panicked. "Why would you spend money like that?" she whispered, hands trembling as she folded it and put it aside. "It was $6, Paulette." She didn't answer, just stared at the wall like someone had just pulled a trigger. One night, Wesley confronted her. He didn't want to push, but the silence was eating him alive. "You know I love our life, right?" he said quietly, as they sat on his threadbare couch eating popcorn. "Even if it's small, even if it's hard." "I know," she said softly. I don't get why you flinch every time I mention trying to grow, or save, or even dream bigger." She didn't speak at first. Then she turned to him, her face pale, her eyes glassy. "Because dreaming bigger can cost more than money if one is not grounded," she said. Wesley waited for more, but that was all she gave. Still, they planned the wedding. A small one. Backyard. Maybe 10 people max. Paulette wanted it simple. Like a garden party from an old film, she said. Wesley didn't mind. He just wanted to see her in white. He wanted to say, "I do." He wanted to start forever. But every time they made a plan, she added more limits. No fancy dress. No registry. No rings beyond the plastic one. And he went along with it. Because love means sacrifice, right? But deep down, something gnawed at him. Love should never feel like a secret. And loving Paulette was starting to feel like walking through a house with locked doors that he wasn't allowed to open. Then came a call, an unknown number, blocked ID. Wesley picked up, thinking it was a client. But the voice was deep, confident, and unsettling. "Is this Wesley Brooks?" Yeah. You don't know me, but I know Paulette." Silence. "Who is this?" "I suggest you ask your fiancée who she really is before you end up married to a ghost." Click. Wesley stared at the phone, blood cold. He looked at Paulette across the room. She was humming to herself, arranging old books by color. And for the first time, he saw it. The tremble in her fingers. The way she never made eye contact for long. The way her smiles always came too fast. Too perfect. He had proposed with a plastic ring, thinking it was the most honest thing he'd ever done. But maybe, just maybe, he was proposing to a woman made entirely of lies. Wesley tried to forget the phone call. He told himself it was a prank. Some jealous ex. A wrong number. Anything but the truth. Because truth, if it was as dark as the man on the line hinted, meant everything he believed in Paulette was a lie. He buried it, like a bad dream. But Axel? Axel was his best friend, and he didn't let it go. "Bro," Axel said one afternoon, arms crossed, leaning against Wesley's cluttered desk. "I've been holding my tongue for a while." "Then keep holding it," Wesley muttered, not looking up from his sketches. "I'm serious, man. That girl, Paulette, she's sketchy." Wesley sighed. "You've barely even met her." "Don't need to. I met you, and I've never seen you this blind before." Wesley dropped his pencil. Axel stepped closer, his tone sharper now. "Tell me how someone who wears thrift store cardigans and eats canned soup just happens to know fine wine, classical music, and reads in French." Wesley blinked. "You're making a conspiracy out of vibe." "She's hiding something, bro. I can feel it in my bones," Axel said, voice low. "And it's not small." Wesley laughed it off. Tried to, at least. But doubt had already sunk its claws in. And then, a week later, it happened. The moment that shattered his comfort. The moment he realized Axel might have been right all along. It started with laundry. Paulette had brought her laundry over because their machine was broken. She stepped out to go ran errands for her sick aunt, and Wesley decided to surprise her by doing her laundry. Something small, a kind gesture. He was halfway through sorting the clothes when a slip of paper floated out, neatly folded. He looked and froze. It was a receipt for a pair of Christian Louboutin stilettos. He stared for the longest time, heart racing. For real. Expensive. Designer expensive. Shoes. He didn't know much about luxury fashion, but even he knew that Christian Louboutin stilettos meant money. It was from a high-end boutique in Manhattan. $1,745. Paid in full. Just 2 weeks ago. His stomach dropped. Paulette didn't have a credit card. She didn't even have a checking account. At least that's what she always said. And she was supposed to be saving for their wedding. With what money? When she got back, he was sitting on the couch. The receipt was on the table. Paulette walked in humming, then stopped cold. She stared at the receipt like it was a scorpion, and there was instant recognition in her eyes. He didn't say anything, just watched her. Slowly, she stepped forward, eyes darting between the receipt and Wesley's face. That she began. He raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess," he said, voice hollow. "Thrift store." Then, okay, she whispered. "I didn't want to tell you because I knew how it would look." How it would look? I was saving. Secretly. Just a little money from side jobs. Side jobs? Yeah, odd gigs. Temp work. Babysitting once. I wanted to surprise you with something nice for the wedding. He stared at her. This wasn't like her. Not the shy, soft-spoken girl who got nervous spending $12 on takeout. Not the woman who cried when he bought her a second-hand leather jacket. "Why are you lying to me?" "I'm not," she said quickly, but her voice cracked, and suddenly she sat down and buried her face in her hands. "I didn't want you to think I was fake," she said between sobs. I saw them. They reminded me of who I used to be. I tried them on, and I felt like a version of myself I thought was gone." Wesley didn't move. "Please," she whispered, looking up. "It was stupid. I panicked, but I didn't mean to lie. I didn't know how to explain without losing you." He sat in silence. The words churned in his gut. She looked broken. Real. Raw. But something still didn't sit right. Her hands were trembling, but not like before. Not from guilt. From something deeper. Fear. That night, after she left, Wesley couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, the receipt in his hand. He stared at the stars, heart thudding. Who was she? And what else was hiding beneath her soft voice and thrift store smiles? Because one thing was clear now. Paulette Cameron was no ordinary girl. And the story she told him, it was cracking. And whatever was beneath the surface was waiting to explode. Wesley had butterflies. Not the nervous kind. The confused kind. The kind that stirred in your stomach when something didn't add up. When reality and instinct went to war and neither side could win. Then came the day Paulette had invited him to dinner. To meet another aunt, she said casually. Just one of the few family members I still talk to. She's low-key, like me. Super private. He agreed, of course. But something about the way she avoided eye contact when she asked, something in her voice felt off. And then came the address. Not an apartment. Not a duplex. Not a condo in a quiet neighborhood. It was a private estate on a hill outside the city. Gated. Guarded. Hidden behind tall hedges and winding roads. Wesley checked the address 3 times on Google Maps. The street didn't even show up clearly. Why would a low-key aunt live here? They arrived just before sunset. The gate opened before they even buzzed in. As Wesley stepped out of the car, his sneakers crunched over pebbled stone. Not gravel, pebbled stone. A small but expensive difference. The mansion, because that's what it was, towered above them like something out of a billionaire's Pinterest board. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Arched doorways. Manicured hedges trimmed into perfect spirals. A uniformed man greeted them at the door with a subtle bow. "Miss Cameron, welcome back." Back. Wesley raised an eyebrow, but Paulette just smiled politely and walked in like she knew the place. Inside was worse. Marble floors. Chandeliers that looked like crystal waterfalls. A staircase that split into 2 wings. And staff. Not just one guy, but a team. A housekeeper adjusting pillows. A chef in white moving through the kitchen like a ghost. A young man setting plates on a dining table long enough to seat 20. Wesley stood frozen in the grand foyer, feeling like an intruder. Paulette turned around, voice too cheerful. Aunt Ray's just upstairs getting dressed. She's a little dramatic. "She lives here?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light. "No," Paulette said too quickly. "She's just house-sitting for a family friend while they're away." "House-sitting? Yeah, Aunt Ray volunteers sometimes. Keeps the place from getting dusty." Wesley nodded slowly, but everything inside him screamed, lie. As they walked through the hallway, Wesley couldn't stop staring. Every room was curated. Every corner whispered wealth. Vases that looked like museum pieces. Rugs that probably cost more than his annual income. Art he didn't understand, but knew was expensive. And then, the photo. He spotted it in the hallway, beside a wall-mounted light fixture. A large, gold-framed family portrait. He paused. His blood ran cold. There she was, Paulette, not in cardigans or scuffed sneakers, but in a sleek black dress, pearls around her neck, hair styled like she stepped off a runway. And next to her a man, tall, sharp, wearing a suit with a pin that looked government-issued. He had the same piercing eyes as Paulette, the same bone structure. She was smiling, not shy, not awkward, poised, like a woman born into power. Wesley took a step back. "Paulette," he called, heart thumping. "Come here." She froze mid-stride. He pointed at the picture. She didn't move, just stared. A beat passed, then another. Finally, she walked toward him. "That's an old photo," she said softly. "You're in pearls. It was for a gala. You said you hated events. I was younger." "And him?" Wesley asked. "Is he the family friend your aunt is house-sitting for?" Paulette's jaw clenched. Then, before she could answer, a voice echoed from behind them. Well, so this is Wesley." They turned. At the top of the staircase stood a woman in a deep burgundy gown, dripping with elegance. "Aunt Ray," Paulette said quickly, forcing a smile. The woman descended slowly, gracefully, like she owned the air in the room. Wesley tried to breathe normally. She looked him up and down. "You're casual." He glanced at his outfit, clean jeans and a button-down. "Dinner's this way," she said with a smirk. "Let's not keep the roast waiting." Dinner was awkward, not tense, chilling. The table was massive. Paulette sat beside him, barely touching her food. Aunt Ray across from them, sipping wine like it was blood. "So," Aunt Ray said, eyes sharp, "you're a designer?" "Graphic," Wesley nodded. "Freelance." "How quaint." Paulette winced. Wesley forced a smile. "Pays the bills." "And how did you two meet again?" "Bookstore." Paulette jumped in quickly. "I spilled coffee on him." "How charming." Ray's gaze lingered on Wesley like she was dissecting him. "Does he know?" she asked suddenly, turning to Paulette. Paulette's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Know what?" Wesley asked, heartbeat pounding. Ray smirked, then waved a hand. "Nothing. Just family drama." Paulette's always had a taste for the dramatic. Wesley stared between them. Paulette looked like she wanted to vanish. He couldn't eat. He couldn't think. All he could hear was that word. "No." "Know what?" After dinner, Paulette practically dragged him out of the house. The moment they reached the car, Wesley turned to her. "What was that?" She didn't answer. "Who are you, Paulette?" "I told you. You said she was your aunt. You said you were house-sitting. That photo." "Paulette, I don't care if your family's rich, but why lie about it?" She swallowed hard. "I'm not ready to tell you everything," she whispered. "Not yet." His jaw clenched. She reached for his hand. "I need you to trust me." He looked down at her trembling fingers, then at the mansion behind them, and all he could think was, who is this woman I'm about to marry? Because one thing was certain now, Paulette Cameron had secrets, and whatever she was hiding wasn't small, like his best friend Axel said. It was life-altering, and it had only just begun to unravel. It was nearly midnight when Wesley's instincts finally won. For weeks, something had gnawed at him, an invisible thread pulling at the seams of Paulette's carefully stitched story. The missing hours. The silk scarf he once found tucked in her coat pocket, too expensive to be hers. The way her hand sometimes trembled when he asked simple questions about her past. One night, fate struck. It was the night he would receive the greatest shock of his life. Paulette couldn't get home because of the rain, so she had to spend the night at Wesley's. She was carrying her regular duffel bag and had been quite anxious to get home, but the rain wouldn't let up and there were reports of flash floods. He offered her the bed and went to the couch to crash. When she commented that he was different, he just laughed and said, "Why rush? I'm going to have you for the rest of my life." She was in awe that such guys still existed. She seemed unhappy that she had a sleepover, but he brushed his thoughts aside. Wesley slept off, and he was such a heavy sleeper. He slept through thunderstorms, as he told Paulette. But just as he was rousing to go use the restroom, he drowsily noticed Paulette creeping around. He woke up but still pretended to be asleep, thinking she was setting up a prank. She didn't know he saw her slip out the door, wearing something that shimmered in the hallway light. Wesley was stunned. He got dressed quickly, threw on a hoodie. Quiet footsteps, careful breaths. He followed her down 3 blocks, heart thudding with each turn she made. Then she hailed a black car, not a regular Uber, a town car. tinted windows. He hesitated, then flagged down a cab. "Stay close to that black car," he told the driver. "But not too close." The driver raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask questions. They drove through the city until the buildings grew taller and the lights got colder. Then the town car slowed near a towering hotel with grand steps and guards in tuxedos. Wesley watched Paulette step out, but this wasn't the Paulette he knew. She wasn't the thrift store girl with chipped nail polish and secondhand boots. No, this Paulette was gliding, draped in a silk gown the color of emerald, her hair pinned with diamonds that sparkled like they had secret. She walked into the ballroom like she belonged there. And Wesley? He just sat in the cab, frozen. He paid the driver, stepped out, and walked closer, heart racing, mouth dry. Through the tall glass doors, he could see it all. Gold chandeliers, velvet ropes, people sipping champagne and laughing like they own the world. And then it happened. A man in a tux raised a glass on stage, cleared his throat. The room fell silent. Wesley edged closer to the entrance, ears straining. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man announced, "please welcome the stunning Miss Paulette Cameron, daughter of real estate icon Richard Cameron." Applause erupted. Wesley staggered back like he'd been punched. "Paulette Cameron? Yes, but that Cameron?" She was smiling on stage, arm linked with an older man in a silver tuxedo. Wesley's world shattered. His heart pounded like it was trying to escape his chest. His vision blurred with betrayal. She had lied. About everything. All those nights eating instant noodles. All the talks about keeping it real. The plastic ring. Sick Aunt. Aunt Ray. The mansion. He turned around slowly, like moving too fast would make it worse. He walked away from the ballroom, past the valet, past the fancy cars, past the version of his life he thought he was building. The cold air cut into his skin, but he didn't feel it. All he could feel was her voice in his head. "Promise me we'll never chase money." A lie. All of it. The apartment was dark when Paulette returned. She thought he was asleep. He wasn't. Wesley sat in the living room, bathed in shadows, eyes locked on the door. When she opened it, humming very softly to herself and kicking off her heels, she froze. He was staring at her, unblinking. "Wesley," she whispered. He didn't move. "How was the party?" Silence. Then she flinched barely. "You followed me?" "I saw everything," he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was quiet. Dead quiet. Paulette swallowed. "I was going to tell you." "When?" His voice cracked. "After the wedding? Or after your father handed you the keys to your empire? But for the rain, you would have gone to your party and returned, and I would have still remained in the dark thinking you were Paulette, the struggling girl, just like me." "What do you want from me, Paulette Cameron? What game are you playing?" She stepped forward. "Please, let me explain." "Explain what?" His fists clenched. "That you're the daughter of Richard Cameron? That everything you told me was a lie." She broke then, dropped her clutch, fell to her knees. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I lied." Wesley's jaw tightened. "But not about us," she continued, trembling. "Not about how I feel about you. That part was always real." He stared at her, breathing hard. "So what was the plan? Find a poor guy, play the part, and test him like some social experiment?" She shook her head violently. "No, you don't understand. My father, he made me do this." Wesley blinked. "What?" She stood slowly, wrapping her arms around herself like she was cold. "My dad's been watching me get used and lied to by people for years. Every guy I dated wanted something. Money, status, an in. He said he was tired, that I was too trusting, too hopeful." She looked up at Wesley, voice trembling. "He gave me a challenge. 1 year, live without money. No cars, no help, no assistance. Just me, in the real world. And if you did," Wesley asked, bitter, "then I could inherit the Cameron legacy," she said quietly. "But only if I found someone real. Someone who loved me without the money." Wesley turned away, pacing, trying to breathe through the ache in his chest. "So, this was a test? And I was the lab rat?" She moved closer. "No, I didn't pick you to test you. I met you. I fell into you. The coffee spill, remember?" He laughed bitterly. "The coffee spill? Was that stage 2? "No," she cried. "That was real. You made me laugh. You made me feel safe. You treated me like a person. not like a brand. He looked at her finally. Everything I told you about my childhood, my struggles, those were real, she whispered. I've never felt more myself than I did with you. He closed his eyes. Silence. Then, you had chances, Paulette. So many chances to tell me. I know. I would have understood, he whispered. I know. He stared at her, then said the words that cracked her heart in half. I don't know who you are anymore. Paulette's knees gave out. She sank to the floor, sobbing. I never meant to hurt you. Wesley crouched in front of her, wiping his eyes. I loved you, Paulette. Everything about you, even when you had nothing. She looked up at him, eyes full of desperation. Then please don't walk away now. He stood, paused at the door. I need time, he said. Then he walked out and left her sobbing in a silk gown, diamonds in her hair and regret in her bones. Wesley lost track of time, had no idea how long he walked for. He just walked, no destination. When he finally returned to his apartment, Paulette was gone, and he sat down and wept like a baby. Wept for falling for her, for being deceived, for missing her, for the quirky moments they had, for everything. The apartment felt colder now, not because the heater was broken, but because she wasn't there. Wesley sat alone in the dark, his thoughts haunting him. He looked at the instant noodles they loved eating together. The plastic rings sat on the shelf, collecting dust. It mocked him with its silence. He had pushed her away. He told her she ruined everything, that he couldn't trust someone who built a relationship on lies. That love wasn't a test. Wesley never saw it coming. Then a storm arrived. But this storm didn't hit with thunder. It arrived in the soft ding of a phone notification. He was at his desk, eyes bloodshot from endless freelance edits, when a headline flashed across his screen like a dagger. Billionaire heiress tests boyfriend with fake life. The Cameron hoax exposed. His throat tightened. He clicked the link, and there it was. A picture of Paulette, but not the Paulette he knew, the shy girl in oversized sweaters and scraped-together meals. This Paulette was radiant, wrapped in couture at some luxury gala, her arm delicately looped through the imposing figure of Richard Cameron. There was no hiding now. She wasn't some struggling waitress taking care of a sick aunt. She wasn't scraping by, budgeting every dime. She was the daughter of that Richard Cameron, the billionaire real estate tycoon, the man with half the city's skyline under his name. Wesley's hands trembled as he scrolled. The article detailed everything. How she had pretended to live poor. How she had tested a man's love. How the entire relationship had been a setup to filter out gold diggers. And worst of all, how someone close to the couple had tipped off the press. A mutual friend. Anonymous. But Wesley didn't have to guess. He knew. It wasn't the headlines that broke him. It was the betrayal behind them. Like he wasn't hurting enough. Wesley scrolled through his phone with shaking hands. The screen still screamed back at him. Billionaire heiress tests boyfriend with fake life. Exclusive details from a close friend. Paulette Cameron, daughter of Richard Cameron, posed as a poor girl to vet potential partners. Sources reveal her boyfriend, Wesley Haynes, was kept in the dark for nearly a year. He couldn't breathe. Photo after photo. Paulette in her silk gown at the elite party. Paulette serving coffee at the diner. Paulette laughing beside him, barefoot on the couch. All of it framed like a twisted social experiment. He stared at the byline. The name of the anonymous source was blurred, but Wesley knew. His gut screamed one name, Axel. He grabbed his jacket and stormed down 2 flights of stairs. His mind was a blur of noise and rage. When he reached Axel's apartment, he didn't knock. He pounded. The door creaked open. Wes. Wesley didn't wait. He shoved the door wide and stormed in. Yo, what's up, man? You knew, Wesley growled. How long? Axel's smirk didn't last long. His face dropped. Look, man, let me explain. How long, Axel? Axel rubbed the back of his neck. A few months. I was looking out for you, okay? She was lying to you. I figured you'd thank me someday. Wesley laughed. A bitter, broken laugh. You figured I'd thank you for selling her out to a gossip site? Or for not telling me before telling the tabloids? Axel's eyes darted. I didn't think it'd go this far. I just thought, look, I needed the money. Wesley stepped closer. What? You sold her out. You used me. You used her. For what? A couple $1,000 and 15 seconds of fame. Then Axel snapped. And what? You think she was going to stay poor forever? Wake up, man. This was a game to her. A fantasy. You were just a test. Don't shoot the messenger. Look, Wes, I was protecting you. Axel snapped. You were falling for a fantasy. No, Wesley said coldly. I was falling in love with someone who, despite all her secrets, never sold me out. But you were my best friend. Silence hung heavy. Then Wesley turned and walked out. That night, the world devoured Paulette. The internet turned her into a meme. Gold digger in reverse. Trust fund girl playing peasant. Rich girl romance experiment gone wrong. Comment sections flooded with vicious opinions. This is messed up. Poor guy. She played him like a violin. Honestly, smart move. Better than marrying a leech. She had no right to manipulate someone's emotions like that. She's a manipulator. He should sue her for emotional distress. Imagine living a lie for a whole year just to test a guy. The next few hours blurred. He couldn't escape the headlines. Every scroll, every click, Paulette's face stared back at him. Heiress in disguise. Paulette Cameron's secret year as a poor girl. From instant noodles to inheritance. The Cameron daughters' love experiment. But Wesley didn't care about the world opinion. He cared about his world, Paulette. And she was gone. Her apartment was empty. Her phone was disconnected. The diner said she quit. The girl who once begged him to never chase money had vanished without a trace. And the silence was louder than the scandal. Wesley wanted to scream. He thought of her laugh. The way she cried when he proposed with a plastic ring. The nights they fell asleep in the park under the stars dreaming of a home filled with art, laughter, and maybe, just maybe, a dog. Were all those moments fake? Were her feelings just part of a billionaire's experiment? Then Paulette showed up at his door one night, her eyes swollen and makeup free. He didn't even open it. He wanted to, but he couldn't. He just stood behind it, fists clenched, heart shredded. I didn't mean for it to be like this, she said through the door. Please, just let me explain. 1 minute. Please. She stayed outside for the longest time. But Wesley stayed silent. He didn't open the door. Eventually, he heard her footsteps fade. And then nothing. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The headlines faded. The buzz died down. But inside Wesley, the war raged on. He missed her. Damn it. He missed her more than he thought he would. But he also hated her. Not for being rich, but for not trusting him enough to tell the truth. He replayed every second of their relationship, hunting for clues he should have seen. The designer shoes were sipped. The SUV, the photo in the mansion, and the pearls. How she spoke and read French. Was love ever real between them? Or was he just a checkbox on her father's twisted checklist? He buried himself in work. Refused Axel's calls. Ate little. Slept less. Until one rainy Tuesday, an envelope arrived. It was slipped under his door in the middle of the night. No return address. No stamp. Just his name handwritten in delicate cursive. Wesley. He knew that handwriting. With shaky fingers, he tore it open. Inside, a single sheet. Wesley, I don't deserve your forgiveness. And maybe I never will. But everything you felt with me, every smile, every tear, every touch, was real. I never faked that. I couldn't. I lied because I was scared. Scared you'd never look at me the same way if you knew who I really was. But I never imagined it would hurt this much to lose you. If your heart hasn't changed, if there's still even a spark left, meet me where it all began. Just once. Paulette. Wesley stared at the paper for a long time. He read it again. And again. The words didn't change. But something in his chest did. He remembered where it all began. The bookstore cafe. The spilled coffee. Her nervous laugh. The way she blushed when she apologized. The way they laughed like they'd known each other for years. She wasn't wearing pearls then. She was wearing thrift store jeans and hope. He clutched the letter. Part of him whispered, "Don't go. She lied to you." But another part, the louder part, whispered something else. She lied to find something real. Then he read the letter 3 more times. Conflicted. Then once more. He checked the time. It was past 7. That night, as the city hummed and headlines faded into yesterday's news, Wesley pulled on his jacket. His hands trembled as he pulled on a hoodie and grabbed his keys. He didn't check his reflection. He didn't need to be anyone special. He just needed to be him. Traffic blurred around him. Raindrops danced on his windshield. His heart thumped a drumbeat of questions. Would she be there? Could he look at her the same way again? Was he walking toward closure? Or was something even more painful? When he arrived, the bookstore cafe looked the same. Same creaky chairs. Same awkward barista with tattoos. Warm lights. The scent of cinnamon and espresso. The hum of quiet chatter. And there she was, Paulette, sitting at the same corner table where she had all those months ago. Same table near the window where their story began. No gown, no glam, just a warm sweater, faded jeans, hair pulled into a loose bun. No makeup, just Paulette, with eyes full of something raw, something unguarded, something painfully honest. She looked up, her eyes locked with his the second he stepped in. Wesley walked toward her, one step at a time, every footfall heavy with doubt. When he stopped in front of her, neither spoke. Not at first. And when their eyes met, time didn't freeze. It shattered. She didn't smile. She just stood slowly, nervously, like a girl facing her own execution. They didn't speak at first. Didn't need to. Wesley sat down across from her, every heartbeat louder than the cafe music. Then Paulette broke the silence. She smiled, just barely. You came. I did. I wanted to tell you so many times. But every time I looked at you, I didn't want to ruin what we had. He didn't say anything. I hated the plan, she whispered. But it was the only way my father would believe someone could love me without seeing the money first. He didn't trust anyone anymore. Neither did I. She looked down. But I should have trusted you. I am so sorry. A long pause. Please forgive me. Please, she said softly. Remember how it felt when it was just us, before the cameras, before the truth. It was real. Wesley's throat tightened. He thought of the first time she made him laugh, so hard he cried. The days they danced barefoot in his kitchen. The moment she held his face and whispered, "You make me feel human." He looked at her now. Tears welled in her eyes. Not the heiress, not the disguise, just Paulette. Paulette looked down at her hands. I don't expect you to forgive me. Wesley didn't blink. I'm not here to forgive. She nodded. Her voice cracked. Then why? I came to find out, he whispered, if the girl I fell in love with was real. She covered her mouth. A tear slid down her cheek. She was. Every second, Wesley looked at her, at all of her, the mess, the mystery, the truth, and said the only words that mattered. Then let's start over. No tests, no disguises, just us. Her eyes widened in ecstatic happiness mixed with disbelief, and then belief. She was overjoyed. I love you, Paulette Cameron. Wesley stated emphatically. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small plastic ring, the same one he proposed with. She gasped. Why do you still have it? She whispered. I don't know, he said. Maybe because I never stopped hoping I'd need it again. Her lips parted, her knees buckled, and in that moment, the bookstore cafe became sacred ground. He stepped closer. I'm still angry, he admitted, still hurt. But I also know this world is full of fake things. And what we had wasn't one of them. She choked back a sob. So what now? She asked. Wesley took her hand. We start over, he said. But this time, no lies. She nodded. He slipped the plastic ring onto her finger again. And in the quiet of the bookstore cafe, the world finally fell silent. They were just Paulette and Wesley again. Not the heiress and the project. Not the scandal and the fool. Just two hearts still choosing each other. They both laughed through tears. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the city, for the first time in months, felt like it could breathe again. No grand ballroom, no golden chandeliers, no guest list that read like a Forbes dinner party. Just a meadow, a soft breeze, and a borrowed wooden arch wrapped in wildflowers. Paulette walked down the uneven patch of grass barefoot, the hem of her simple ivory dress brushing against the earth. No diamonds, no tiara, just a tiny wildflower tucked behind her ear and a smile so bright it outshone the sun. Wesley stood at the front in a white linen shirt, sleeves rolled, pants a little wrinkled, heart pounding out his chest. His mother sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Her little cousin filmed the ceremony with shaky hands and too much zoom. And beside them sat a man in a tailored suit that looked wildly out of place. Richard Cameron, the billionaire, the father of the bride. He watched in silence, hands clasped in front of him, eyes never leaving his daughter. The rest of Paulette's extended family, they didn't get it. One cousin whispered, "Wait, where's the helicopter entrance?" Another aunt muttered, "This can't be the real wedding." But it was. Paulette had insisted. "This is what I want," she told them. "No excess, no spectacle, just love, just real." The priest began to speak. Wesley's hands trembled as he took hers. "I never thought," he said, voice cracking, "that someone like you could love someone like me. But you did, even when the world called it fake." Paulette smiled through her tears. "You loved me when I was nobody, and now that you know everything, you still choose me. That's all I've ever wanted." They exchanged rings, simple, silver bands they bought from a local artisan. No crowd roared, no press clicked photos, just a small group of people and the loudest kind of love. Later that afternoon, the meadow turned into a picnic. Plastic chairs, paper plates, grilled corn and jollof rice from Wesley's mom's kitchen. No five-course menu, no caviar, just laughter and unfiltered joy. Mr. Cameron sat quietly on a folded chair, a paper plate in his lap, watching Paulette laugh with Wesley's younger cousins. He turned to Wesley's mother and offered a tight smile. "She's never looked this free before," he said. Wesley's mom nodded, sipping her soda. "Neither has Wes." It was the kind of moment money couldn't buy. And Richard Cameron, billionaire real estate mogul, tycoon, titan, finally smiled happy he'd set the test in the first place. He didn't just want a man for Paulette. He wanted a keeper of hearts. And he had found one in Wesley. A week later, headlines resurfaced. But this time, they weren't about Paulette. They were about Axel. A leaked recording hit the gossip blogs. Axel's voice on tape, bragging at a bar. "Man, I made a killing off that Eris story. Got 10 grand up front, bought myself a new bike." The internet turned on him faster than he could tweet a denial. He lost his clients. His freelance work dried up, and no one was buying his story anymore. Karma didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be true. When Wesley heard the news, he didn't gloat. He already knew. He simply deleted Axel's number and kissed his wife on the forehead. Their honeymoon? A road trip. One old car. A cooler of snacks. 2 backpacks. And no destination, just detours. They stopped in random towns, danced under gas station lights, and camped in places that didn't even have names. No luxury suite. No spa packages. Just Paulette, in sweats and no makeup, singing off-key to the radio. And Wesley, driving with one hand and holding hers with the other. They chose simplicity, on purpose. People offered interviews, magazine deals, TV segments. They declined them all. "No one else needs to understand our story," Paulette said, curled up beside Wesley one night. "Just us." And Wesley smiled. "That's all I ever wanted." Back in the city, Richard Cameron made it official. One document, signed quietly. No press release. Wesley Haynes was added to the family trust. Not for the money, but for the principle. "My daughter chose him," Richard said, "and I trust her." He gifted them a modest home. Not a mansion, but something charming with enough space for memories. He also gave Wesley something far rarer. A letter, typed on fine paper, sealed with his initials. "Dear Wesley, you passed a test you didn't even know you were taking. You proved that character isn't defined by wealth, but by integrity, resilience, and kindness. I've spent years building empires, but I've never been prouder than I am watching you build a life with my daughter. You are not just her husband. You are now my son. With respect, Richard Cameron." Wesley read it 3 times before placing it in a small wooden box beside their wedding bands and Paulette's handwritten letter. He turned to her and said, "You know what scares me?" "What?" "That this feels too perfect." Paulette leaned in, her forehead against his. "Then let's keep choosing us. Every single day." And so they did. No mansion, no tabloids, no fairy tale rewritten by the media. Just a simple life, rich in laughter, quiet in fame, loud in love. Because in the end, the girl who hid everything and the boy who had nothing chose to build something real together. And that made them the richest couple the world never saw coming. Here's some questions for you, our viewers. Do you think Paulette was wrong for testing Wesley with a fake life? Or was she protecting her heart? Would you walk away if you found out the person you love had been lying? Even if it was to find something real? Axel betrayed his best friend for fame and money. Do you think he got what he deserved? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming stories.